Hi, this is Hana with Team Elite, where we inspire you to dream big and go bold. We are with our Think and Grow Rich series, our live audiobook sessions, Chapter 3, Faith, Video 3. So guys, there's a lot going on in this chapter, so we're going to get straight into it. We're going to have Vahid giving us a commentary. So let's dive in. We are on page 66. This is the black and gold edition. Surely civilization has produced a sufficient number of intelligent human beings to make use of this great lesson, which the Depression has taught the world. During this Depression, the world had evidence in abundance that widespread fear will paralyze the wheels of industry and business. Out of this experience will arise leaders in business and industry who profit by the example by Gandhi has set for the world that will apply to this business the same tactics which he has used in building the greatest following known in the history of the world. These leaders will come from the rank and file of the unknown men who now labor in the steel plants, the coal mines, the automobile factories, and in the small towns and cities of America. Business is due for reform. Make no mistake about this. The methods for the past, based upon economic combinations of force and fear, will be supplanted by the better principles of faith and cooperation. Men who labor will receive more than daily wages. They will receive dividends from the businesses the same as those who supply the capital for business. But first they must give more for their employers and stop the bickering and bargaining by force at the expense of the public. They must earn the right to dividends. Moreover, and this is the most important thing of all, they will be led by leaders who will understand and apply the principles employed by Mahatma Gandhi. Only in this way we may have leaders from getting their followers the spirit of full cooperation, which constitutes power in its highest and most enduring form.
So he's giving the responsibilities to leaders to make sure that their followers understand the concept of faith, and that's how Gandhi was able to do that. We saw, in the book talks about 200 million, without owning much, without having much, but just purely based on his faith, he's been able to build one of the biggest followers and armies, if you want to, consider that. So how was he able to do that? He's one man. So he definitely utilized the concept of faith.
This stupendous machine age in which we live, and from which we are just emerging, has taken the soul out of men. Its leaders have driven men as though they were pieces of cold machinery. They were forced to do so by the employees who have bargained at the expense of all concerned to get and not to give. The watchword of the future will be human happiness and contentment, and when this state of mind shall have been attained, the production will take care of itself more effectively than anything that has ever been accomplished, where men did not and could not mix faith and individual interest in their labor.
So that's what I was talking about to all the employees. Do more than what you're expected to do, because if you do more, the company does better, the company gives back dividends to everybody, and then guess what? Everybody will flourish.
Because of the need for faith and cooperation in operating business and industry, it will be both interesting and profitable to analyze an event which provides an excellent understanding of the method by which industrialists and businessmen accumulate great fortunes by giving before they try to get. The event chosen for this illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was being formed. As you read the story, keep in mind the fundamental facts, and you will understand how ideas have been converted into huge fortunes. First, the huge United States Steel Corporation was born in the mind of Charles M. Schwab in the form of an idea he created through his imagination. Second, he mixed faith with this idea. Third, he formulated a plan for the transmutation of his idea into physical and financial reality. Fourth, he put his plan into action with his famous speech at the University Club. Fifth, he applied and followed through on his plan with persistence and backed it with the firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you are one of those who have often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, the story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation will be enlightening. If you have any doubt that men can think and grow rich, this story should dispel the doubt, because you can plainly see in the story of the United States Steel the application of a major portion of the 13 principles described in the book. This astounding description of the power of an idea was dramatically told by John Lowell in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted. a pretty after-dinner speech for $1 billion. When, on the evening of December 12, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor to a young man from out of the West, not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American industrial history. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stuart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged the dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steelman to Eastern banking society. But they didn't expect him to stampede the convention. They warned him, in fact, that the bosoms with New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to oratory, and that, if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and Harrimans and Vanderbilts, he better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go after that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab, as has become his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with his presence only briefly, and so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole affair was so little moment that no mention of it was found its way into print the next day. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what there was restrained. Few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Monongahela, and none knew him well. But before the evening was over, they, and with them Money Master Morgan, were to be swept off their feet, and $1 billion baby, the United States Steel Corporation, was to be conceived. It is perhaps unfortunate, for the sake of history, that no record of Charlie Schwab's speech at the dinner ever was made. He repeated some parts of it at a later date during a similar meeting of Chicago bankers, and still later, when the similar meeting was given, the government brought suit to dissolve the Steel Trust. He gave his own version from the witness stand of the remarks that simulated Morgan into a frenzy of financial activity. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical, for the necessities of language never bothered Schwab, full of epigram and threaded with wit. But aside from that, it was gallant force and effect upon the $5 billion of estimated capital that was represented by the diners. After it was over and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour more. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on, full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many of other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar rubber, whiskey oil, or chewing gum combinations. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago stock jobbers who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it and failed. Albert H. Gary, the sanctimonious country lawyer, wanted to foster, but he wasn't big enough to be impressive. Until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize.
We're talking about a lot of powerful names over here.
They're recognizable,
Schwab,
yeah.
Morgan, right? Gate. We're talking about a lot of powerful people. Well, go ahead. You're doing good.
The heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial undertaking ever conceived. The project was regarded as a delirious dream of easy money crackpots. The financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition-crushing combinations had become operative in the steel world through the devices of the Juvile business pirate John W. Gates. John already had formed this American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company. The National Tube and American Bridge Companies were two or more Morgan concerns, and the Moore brothers had forsaken the match and cookie business to form the American group Tin Plate, Steel Hoop, Sheet Steel, and the National Steel Company. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle, he had viewed with amusement and then with resentment the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, he was content to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was in that speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all, a plum pudding, as one writer said, without the plums. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900 undoubtedly carried the inference not through the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world future for steel, of reorganization, of efficiency, of specialization, and the scrapping of unsuccessful mills and concentration of effort on the flourishing properties, of economies in the ore traffic, of economies in overhead and administrative departments, of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purposes, he inferred, had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in fact that it's restricted the market in an era where everything cried for expansion. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created, more uses for steel would be devised, and a goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, though he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of modern mass production. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business for wee Andrew Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock tickers to fiddle around in anticipation for the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feast of reason Schwab had placed before him. When he assured himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab and found that young man rather coy. Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found his trusted company president had been flirting with an emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John W. Gates, then go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so on the elder man's pressing invitation, Schwab went to New York and presented himself at the door of the financier's library. Now, certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of the drama, the stage was set by Andrew Carnegie, that the dinner to Schwab, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King were events arranged by the canny Scot. The truth is exactly the opposite. When Schwab was called into the consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men whom Andrew regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did take into the conference with him, in his own handwriting, 6 sheets of copper-plate figures, representing to his mind the physical worth and the potential earning capacity of every steel company he regarded as an essential star in the new metal firmament. 4 men pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in divine right of money. With him, his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, whom Morgan scorned as a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the process of making and selling steel than any whole group of men then living. Throughout the conference, the Pittsburghers' figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and no more. He was insistent, too, upon including the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even to satisfy the greed of friends who wanted to unload their companies upon the broad Morgan shoulders. Thus he left out, by design, a number of the larger concerns upon which the walruses and carpenters of Wall Street had cast hungry eyes. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. "Do you think you can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell?" he asked. "I can try," said Schwab. "If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter," said Morgan. So far so good, but would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab thought about 320 million. What would he take payment in? Common or preferred stocks, bonds, cash? Nobody could raise a third of $1 billion. 320 billion. There was a golf game in January on the frost-cracked heath of the St. Andrews Links in Westchester, with Andrew bundled up in sweaters against the cold and Charlie talking volubly, as usual, to keep his spirits up. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage hard by. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement and comfort of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab, and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell it for." The figure was approximately 400 billion, and he was reached by taking the 320 billion mentioned by Schwab as a basic figure and adding it to 80 billion to represent the increased capital value over the previous 2 years. Later on the deck of transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said refuelly to Morgan, "I wish you had asked for 100 billion more." "If you had asked for it, you would have gotten it," Moore told him cheerfully. There was an uproar, of course. A British correspondent cabled the foreign steel world as appalled by the gigantic combination. President Hadley of Yale declared unless trusts were regulated, the county might expect an emperor in Washington within the next 25 years. But that able stock manipulator Keene went at his work, shoveling the new stock at the public so vigorously that all the excess water, estimated at some 600 million, was absorbed in a twinkling. So Carnegie had his millions, and the Morgan Syndicate had 62 million for all his trouble, and all the boys from Gates to Gary had their millions. The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president for the new corporation and remained in control until 1930. The dramatic story of big business, which you have just finished, was included in this book because it is perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent.
That is an amazing story. A lot of big guys sitting at a big round table, putting together business and making money. So this is exactly what happens. Your desire could be transmuted into its equal and physical equivalent. So once you grasp on that, you got to repeat that to yourself a few times. Once you start repeating it, you kind of grasp it. It's an easy concept to understand, but you do need to repeat it to yourself.
Yeah, what I got from that story was that if he would have asked for $1 million more, he would have gotten it.
Definitely.
That conviction.
And a lot of people made a lot of money. So that's what happened. That's when Carnegie wanted to spend the remainder of his life giving his money back. So that's why he took the deal. You know, they wrote on a piece of paper. He said, okay. I mean, Morgan was completely shocked that Carnegie actually accepted that because they didn't think that he was going to sell. But he sold because he wanted to give his money back. That's what ended up happening.
Wow.
So, do you want to continue the rest on the next video?
Yeah, let's do. We're gonna do. Yeah, we're gonna.
How many
do
more
4.
pages you got on this one?
Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3. Yeah. You know, guys, if you're willing to hit it out with me, we only have 3 more pages. So
3 more pages. Then let's finish it
go.
up. So the chapter 3 on faith will be 4 videos, 3 videos.
3 videos.
3 videos. Let's continue.
The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president of the new corporation and remained in control until 1930. The dramatic story of big business, which you have just finished, included in this book, is a perfect illustration and method of how desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent. I imagine some readers will question the statement that a mere intangible desire can be converted into its physical equivalent. Doubtless, some will say you cannot convert nothing into something. The answer in the story is in the story of the United States Steel. The gigantic organization was created in the mind of one. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that gave it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into the United States Steel. The steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it had been brought into legal existence were incidental, but careful analysis will disclose that the fact that the appraised value for the properties acquired by the corporation increased in the value by an estimated $600 million by the mere transaction which consolidated them under one management. In other words, Charles M. Schwab's idea, plus the faith which he had conveyed it into the minds of J.P. Morgan and the others, was marked for a profit of approximately $600 million, not an insignificant sum of a single idea.
I was back then, not now. So convert that to today's money.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot.
Billions. What happened to some of the men who took their share of the millions of dollars of profit made the transaction is a matter of which we are not now concerned. The important feature of the astounding achievement is that it serves an unquestionable evidence of the soundness of a philosophy described in this book, because this philosophy was the warp and the woof of the entire transaction. Moreover, the practicability of the philosophy has been established by the fact that the United States Steel Corporation prospered and became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employing thousands of people, developing new uses for steel, and opening new markets, thus proving that the $600 million in profit which that Schwab idea produced was earned. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitations. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask your price for having.
Faith removes limitation.
Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask your price for having passed this way. Remember also that the man who created the United States Steel Corporation was practically unknown at the time. He was merely Andrew Carnegie's Man Friday until he gave birth to his famous idea. After that, he quickly rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought.
Read that one more time. Both poverty and riches are offsprings
both
of...
poverty and riches are the offsprings of thought.
So if you think positive things will happen. And it's not just thinking positive. That's what a lot of people think. Just me sitting at home or going to the office or go to my business and think positive, things will happen. No. That's one part of this success formula that we got to do. So we're going to put the formula up later on, and we definitely are working on the workbook that we're compiling together, where we could have for everybody, so you could actually go through the questions and ask the questions to yourself and be able to answer it. And through the answers of the questions that you have answered, you'll be able to put your mission together, your burning desire together. You do your affirmation through it. So we got a lot of stuff planned out for you guys. So good job, Hannah, for doing it. This was a long one too, but we finished the chapter, so now we're looking excited for the next one.
Great, guys. All right, what did you get from this story? This was a big story. Let us know, comment down below, like us, subscribe for more of our videos, and we're going to see you guys the next time. We're Napoleon.Hill and Team Elite on Instagram. Come say hi. We'll see you next time.
Take care.